With the Nobel Peace Prize going to Yazidi campaigner Nadia Murad and Congolese doctor Denis Mukwege, it's further shining the spotlight on the work that is being done globally to combat sexual violence. Now, over the past year, there have been many examples of how people are approaching this issue. To talk about the Nobel win and how far society's come in addressing sexual violence, feminist author Mona Eltahawy joins us now live from Montreal. Mona, what are your thoughts on this Nobel Prize? Has the committee caught up to this Me Too movement?
Yes, Reshmi, I always believe that the Nobel Peace Prize is ultimately political in nature. They usually try to send a message. And I think what they're doing is they want to force on the global consciousness this very necessary conversation about sexual violence. And in the case of Nadia Murad and Dr. Denis Mukwege, that conversation is asking the world to recognize finally, because it's been kind of slowly getting there, that rape and sexual violence are used as weapons of war. They're not byproducts of war. Because in the past, people would say, oh, it's, soldiers and the whole boys will be boys. Terrible conversation, but on the level of war. And so I see the Nobel Committee is saying, look, we have to recognize now that this is actually a weapon of war, which is great.
Yes, and rape was declared a war crime just a couple of decades ago, clearly still an ongoing issue in global conflicts. So I wonder if the committee is it catching on to a trend here, or will this have significant impact for women around the world?
Well, I think it's also a great reminder to the world that rape and sexual violence are being used as weapons of war to this day. When we look at Rohingya women and what's happening to them in Myanmar, Burma, when we look at what's happening to women in Syria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Dr. Mukwege works, so many countries. And so we have to recognize that this is a fact. This is a reality of conflict and war everywhere. And I really think this is absolutely urgent. The conversation cannot stop at war. We can't hold sexual violence at arm's length and say, oh, it just happens there, during these terrible times of war and conflict. And that's where Me Too comes in. And I wish that the committee had also named Tarana Burke, the black feminist activist who started Me Too in 2006 to support survivors of sexual violence. Because once we connect war and the way that rape is used as a weapon of war to the day-to-day sexual violence that Tarana Burke has kind of brought into the fore, and which became global last year when finally white women actresses talked about it, I think that is the ultimate conversation. Because your previous report was about Kavanaugh. And I want to remind everyone that the United States, which is the most powerful country in the world, elected as president a man, Donald Trump, who was accused by about 20 women of sexual assault. That same man has nominated another man who has been accused by several women of sexual assault to be a justice in the country's highest court. So now we have to recognize sexual violence is a day-to-day reality. So just as the women were saying, no more rapists in power, we have to recognize ultimately that the voices of black women like Tarana Burke, who have been saying this for centuries, from the days of slavery, through the days of war, through the days of the civil rights movement, to today, in our homes, in the street, and in work. And I think that is the conversation that we must use the Nobel Peace Prize to have.
Yes, and even in our headlines today on the network, we're talking about sexual assault with the Nobel Peace Prize in the Catholic Church. And again, to your point, with Brett Kavanaugh possibly being confirmed as a U.S. Supreme Court judge. The U.S. president might have thought that he was in line for this award. But instead, it's going to two activists to work on sexual violence. What power does the Nobel Peace Prize have in securing safety for women around the world, though, Mona?
I think that the power is more symbolic than actual. I think where the actual power comes in, this is where we come in now as the global consciousness, and where I come in as a feminist and fellow feminists come in. We have to make this a conversation about patriarchy, because patriarchy is universal. Patriarchy exists in countries that are at war. Patriarchy exists in countries that are at peace. Patriarchy definitely exists in the two-party system of the United States. It exists in my country of birth, the military regime that runs Egypt, the absolute monarchy of Saudi Arabia. So we have to use this prize to have this very necessary conversation about patriarchy and the way that it enables and protects misogyny, the way that patriarchy enables and protects predators, sexual predators, whether they're in the Catholic Church, the US presidency, the US Supreme Court, the Egyptian military, or anywhere else in the world. Once we have that conversation, I believe we help women, we protect women by dismantling patriarchy. It is absolutely essential to destroy patriarchy. And I believe the way to do that is to recognize what I call the trifecta of misogyny. That trifecta connects the state, the street, and the home, because that way we can talk about the violence of the state, the violence of the street, and the violence at the home, and how together they oppress women, and how together they protect and enable predators and sexual violence against women. This is how we protect women. So this prize is symbolic, but it allows us, and it must force everyone who doesn't want to have a conversation about patriarchy and the absolute essential need to destroy patriarchy.
So it sounds like instead of focusing more on women, we're now maybe getting to the point where we're looking at the causes of what's been happening to women, and you're suggesting patriarchy. Words like dismantle and destroy might scare some people. Mona, what do you replace it with?
Well, here's the thing. I think that we are talking about women and men when we talk about patriarchy, because I think a lot of people get very upset when they hear me say, I want to destroy patriarchy, because they think I'm saying I want to destroy men. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I want to destroy a system of oppression that uses other systems of oppression like racism, like class, like disabilities, like various forms of oppression, specifically against women, but also against men. We have to remember that patriarchy hurts men too. So what I want to replace patriarchy with is a system of equality and justice, of a system that does not allow predators, whether they're in the Catholic Church or the US presidency, to use their power to continue to silence women and men. Now remember, a lot of the victims of the Catholic Church's predation, or Catholic priest predation rather, have been boys and men. So this is not about destroying men. This is about destroying the ultimate system of injustice and the ultimate system that enables and protects that injustice that is used against everyone. So I want to destroy patriarchy and replace it with equality and justice. That, I think, is something that we can all agree on.
It's great to get your thoughts, Mona. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Reshmi.
That is feminist author Mona Eltahawy joining us from Montreal.